All righty, we are live and good morning to you. Or if you're watching the replay, good afternoon, good evening, and just whatever time when you happen to be checking this out. Today we are talking about spooky season. And one of the unfortunate news flashes of spooky season this year is that one of my little kittens, Herbie, yeah, he found one of my Halloween mugs, and unfortunately, he toppled it over the kitchen table and it met its end. Very sad. It said resting witch face on it. But I suppose these are the dangers that are inherent in raising kittens, so what are you going to do? But now on to the real business at hand, enjoying spooky season in all of its glory. If you are here with me, please say hello to me in the live chat, smash the like button. And then as we go through this conversation, do not be bashful. Share your thoughts, observations, opinions, whatever is on your mind throughout this discussion so we can have a more interactive experience. Makes for a better show. If you are watching on Rumble, I have you on my tablet right here, and I'll be able to keep track and I'll be able to interact with you that way. And if you are on YouTube, I'll be able to put your comments up on the screen. So we are all set, I do believe. Let's get started. Now, ghost hunting, one of the joys of the season. If you're like me, you enjoy the ghost hunting videos and the I got something haunted, there's something weird in my house kind of videos. It's good fun, whether or not, how much of it is real, how much of it is theatrical. That's always a little bit difficult to tell unless you're actually there, but it's good fun no matter what. But I do notice that the approach of a lot of the people who go ghost hunting or people who find themselves in situations or in places that might be a little bit haunted, I just think there's room for improvement, and I thought we could talk about it here. So, if you are thinking about going ghost hunting this season, first things first, do take sensible precautions. We are not normies. Most of the people watching this are witches and pagans, so we should know better. Don't go into things blind, don't go into things undefended. Have a bit of silver on you. That's always a good idea. One thing I like to keep on handy is a supply of Palo Santo incense. The beauty of Palo Santo incense and one of its benefits over and above sage is that Palo Santo will actually transmute energy. So if there's something deeply unfriendly, it will at the very least take the edge off of that, if not, switch it around altogether. So that's a handy dandy thing. And it's also a very gentle way of interacting with an atmosphere that isn't particularly friendly. Another thing is just go in with a good frame of mind. You don't have to be, I'm chipper and cheerful and everything is lovely all the time. Yeah, you don't have to do that. For the love of all the gods, please don't. But go into it with confidence. Go into it feeling a sense of ownership over yourself, and also go into it with genuine curiosity, not, being overwhelmed by any of your fears, not being overly excited if you can help it, which you may not be able to, about what you might find. But go into it with a good, strong frame of mind. Own yourself, and you will find that your surroundings might open themselves up to you a little bit more. And if necessary, if you need to redirect something, you'll be in a position to do so. And then, of course, as far as physical safety goes, it is prudent to have a means to physically protect yourself. And not everything that goes bump in the night is actually of the unseen realm. Sometimes it is humans, and they don't always have the very best of intentions. So be sensible is all I'm saying. Just be sensible. And of course, remember your purpose in doing this. If you are looking for the oogie boogies, and then you find some evidence of the oogie boogies, there's knocks you can't explain, a sound of scratching, things are moving around, and you don't have an immediate physical explanation for it. For mercy's sake, don't do what the ghost hunters that I see on YouTube do. Don't screech and panic and disbelief and oh, I can't believe it. Did you hear that? I swear to God, I heard something. Was that you? No. Don't do that. That's what you were there to find. You were literally there to find that sort of thing. So don't, go around screaming like a 5-year-old girl if you happen to possibly have found something. For one thing, it is rude to the spirits. It really is. I mean, just imagine you're in between your incarnations and you're, hanging around a particular location. Some ghost hunters come by and they say, "Oh, we would love to communicate with you." Like, "Oh, cool. It's been a while since I communicated with, with the living. What fun this could be." And then they ask you, "Could you show us a sign of your presence, please?" And you're like, "Well, okay." You gather your energy and you make a little something happen. And then you have screeching, panicking, and pandemonium as a reward for your efforts. I just don't think being on that side of it, I don't think I'd be all that amused. I think, sometimes when these encounters go a little bit wrong, it might be some of it is not so much maliciousness on the part of the spirit, it's just exasperation. So just, treat them as you would wish to be treated if you were in that particular circumstance, because we all end up there at some point or another. And of course, if and when you do experience something, do try to eliminate any kind of mundane causes. Document your process. Look for the boring explanation first, because even if you're going in with sincerity and good intentions, you don't know what other people might have done to the site. You don't know if someone else might be around essentially messing with you. So try to make sure that you have eliminated all reasonable possibilities that there could be some kind of human interference or human. Um, oh, well, someone who put together a scene, someone who's trying to manipulate you. Try to eliminate any possibility of that if you possibly can. That way, when you're going over your results and you're talking about your experiences, you'll have better information really to work with. So those are those things. Before I move on, though, a few special thoughts for witches. If you are a witch, or if you have someone who has the ability to practice the craft, or if you are someone who has a strong psychic talent, empaths in particular, if that is you, be sure that you really have shielded yourself and you're taking good care of yourself and you're going into this situation strong. Make sure that you have a means to spiritually defend yourself if that should become necessary. The reason why I say this is because anyone who has these above average psychic abilities, what happens is that if you are undefended, if you are untrained, if you don't know how to use your capabilities very well, you have a lot of energy that's going into your system, that's projecting out from your system, and that essentially could turn you into a food source or prey for an unfriendly spirit. Now, if you are a well-disciplined witch and you know what you're doing and you are well protected and you know how to handle yourself, then you are no longer in a position of being potential prey. You could be seen by some spirits as essentially as a predator. So if that is your situation, I'm not saying, let your guard lower, because until you know what you're doing, you should exercise caution and prudence. But essentially assure that you are coming in a spirit of goodwill, simply saying that out loud. If there are spirits in this area, I want you to know that I am coming here to explore. I am coming here in an effort to communicate. I'm coming here just to better understand what's going on that side of the veil. I am not here to harm you. And as long as you are not harming me or my companions, then, we don't have any problems. And just assure them that you are not there to dislodge them or to give them other issues or to torment them in some way. So that's just something to keep in mind. Other things to keep in mind is that these unseen beings, they're not all cut from the same cloth. And, you're not going to necessarily know upon first encounter who or what it is or what they're capable of. It could be ghosts of departed humans. It could be malevolent entities who have never incarnated into human form. You could be talking to house spirits. And by that, I mean essentially the soul of the house, or land spirits. They're all different kinds of fae. There could be energy echoes, essentially from dramatic events that took place within the site you're investigating, and it left such a psychic impression. It simply left a stain, on the walls, the ceiling, the furniture. It left an actual stain, and that might be what you're actually encountering, and you don't know. And that is one of the things that you have to investigate. If something goes bump, and cool, okay, don't see any human causes for that bump, so I'm going to investigate more spiritual possibilities. You still are left with a very big question of what was it? Now, because we have that big question mark, and because, especially if you're new to all of this, you don't necessarily get a good intuitive reaction. You don't necessarily know straight off, whether something is inherently harmful, whether it's, pretty harmless, what the deal is. And so you can have an excess sense of foreboding, and that might not really indicate the nature of the spirit, but that could be your own personal anxiety coming up to the surface. This is reason 10 billion and one why I tend to nag practitioners about the absolute need to be able to always be able to discern when you're paying attention the difference between your own personal energy and energy that is being projected into your system that your system is interacting with. It's like breathing. We don't really notice breathing. It's just something we automatically do unless we stop and we listen. And it's the same kind of process when it comes from energy, sensing energy that is coming into you, sensing energy that is going forth from you, being able to tell the difference between your energy signature and everything else. That takes time, it takes practice, it takes paying attention. And if you are going into this ghost hunting kind of expedition, definitely sharpen your skills, definitely go up into that situation where you are actually paying attention so that you are able to tell the difference between, oh, I'm not particularly comfortable, and of, guys, something is actually really, really wrong, and we may need to withdraw and come up with a new plan because there's problems here. Another thing to remember is that if you are encountering a spirit and it is conscious, it may be considered the location you're at, that it's home, that it belongs there, particularly if you are dealing with a house spirit, that is literally its place. So I would suggest conducting yourself as a guest. Don't act like you own the place. Don't act aggressively unless you are aggressed upon. And even in that situation, if you have a sense that this really is the house spirit and all it's trying to do is essentially is to protect the home and those it considers to be within its care, you might need to exercise a little bit more self-control, not necessarily bring out your big magical tools in order to rid the house of this, because it may not be a problem. It may essentially just be acting like a guard dog, doing its job, saying, I don't know you. I'm not sure if it's okay for you to be here. And you're kind of swaggering a little bit too much here. So I think I'm going to put you on guard and remind you that you don't own the place. So keep that into consideration. There's a lot of different possibilities. It's hard to go through them all in one investigation, but try to keep your head and, sorry, on my lap, there's a kitten that just jumped up on me and was using its claws to do so. The guilty party is Herbie. Herbie, who is Smasher of Halloween mugs. Okay, well, now that I'm no longer being stabbed with tiny baby claws, let us proceed. If I can get my slide to go. There we go. So next thing I want to talk about today is this idea of legacy. Hence, this image of the tree that has roots that go below and, the branches above, and how it's all a reflection of each other. And that's one of the most beautiful images that have really been strongly adopted by many different pagan paths. We recognize that we are part of this everlasting process. We come from roots, we grow into this beautiful tree, we set forth the leaves, and then the process begins again for the next generation, and we all play our part in that. And in order to really play our part properly, we have to consider about our own heritage, our cultural heritage, our national heritage, our own personal family traditions. And this is particularly important for those of us in Western countries, because for over a century now, we have been actively encouraged to destroy our own heritage. We've been told that everything that has ever happened has been, wrong, as opposed to, oh, look, human beings. Sometimes the human beings act well, sometimes they act very badly, and there are unintended consequences and all this and that. Instead of having a nuanced, realistic view that you're going to find heroes and villains in every human civilization ever, we have really been painted as just the absolute villains, and everything's our fault, and wouldn't it just be better if we didn't exist? But if we insist on existing, could we just stop being ourselves? Could we give up the things that we care about? Could we give up our philosophies? Could we give up our religions? And I'm talking about people who are both anti-Christian and who are anti-pagan. They want to replace it with something else, which is, of course, another controlling ideology that is simply trying to get rid of its rivals. And in order to do that and to seize power, you have to destroy what was. It is a kind of psychological warfare against us. And we are combatants in it every day, whether we want it or not. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And one of the things I've thought about is, particularly in America, we are very, very bad about this. We are addicted to the new. We like novelty. Is it fresh? Is it a new invention? Is it different from what came before? And we tend to treat that as something that's automatically good. Sometimes it is. And sometimes, it didn't really improve upon what had already existed. And it certainly wasn't beneficial as opposed to what was there before. I've been harping for the past couple of months of this monstrosity of a duplex that is taking the place where a late Victorian family home used to stand. The home, it did have to be teared down. It had terrible fire damage, and there was nothing else to be done. But the fact of remains of, what did someone choose to replace it with? They saw that old structure, they realized it had to go, but what did you put up in its place? A plain taupe box that is anonymous, that is not intended for people to actually make a home there, put down roots there. It's not a place for people to stay. It's not a place for people to really leave their mark. It's just a place to keep your clothes, place to sleep, be there temporarily. You're just one of many, and there'll be 1,000 people after you, at least until, that building, which wasn't exactly built up to high standards, finally collapses, and then it has to be replaced. Maybe by the time that rolls around, someone will put something decent where it stood. But until then, you just have this blah. And I really am concerned because you see this not just on the architecture on my street where I currently live. You see this in American cities. You see this even to a certain extent in European cities. And it isn't always a matter of, oh, well, we did what we could to preserve these buildings, but the time came and there's just nothing else we can possibly do. So instead, we built something that was modern and brutalistic and something that really was not intended to give humans any pleasure seeing it. Isn't really about humans themselves. It's just we put up a box and either it's housing people or it's a place for people to work. Either way, you're not going to look at it and think, gosh, the mind that building came from, or look at the artistry, or I wonder what kind of people did a lot of hard work, or look at the ornamentation. It took a lot of artistic skill and vision for someone to bring that into fruition, and wouldn't it cool to just be in that environment? It's not inspiring people to do these things, and because we are not looking after our architecture. And I won't even get started on the travesty that is modern art, because we are not focused upon creating beautiful environments that reference our own traditions and our culture and our history and our dreams, and things that are not building us up. It's more of that, oh, destroy everything good about yourself. Make everything plain, make it boring, make it anonymous, make it to where you don't really exist as an individual anymore. You're just kind of part of this porridge goo. So, do we have the right to destroy what remains of our history that actually is beautiful, that speaks to a different time, that speaks to traditions, that it speaks to as being part of a chain of architectural styles and philosophical ideas? Do we have the right to really to destroy that? And I'm coming closer and closer to the point of, no, I really don't think that we do. I think we've lost too much. I don't think we dare lose anything more than what we already have. And it's not a good thing for us to be cooperating with this effort to put us in a state of zero. And that's not a natural state for humans to be in. We never, in the time of recorded history, have we ever been at zero. We've always been building upon what came before. And yes, sometimes there are huge, incredible changes. And I'm not really so much against that, but I am against the total reinvention of throw everything before away and replace it with something of less value. So the question I want to leave people with is, are we making choices to uphold and continue what we inherited? The good stuff. I'm not saying anybody needs to carry on with the tradition if it's a bad tradition. I'm not saying that at all. There does come a time and a place for some things to come to an end, but the good things, the beautiful things, the things that are a celebration and expression of the human spirit, things that can speak to people, even across ethnic, cultural, religious lines. Are we taking care of these things? Are we continuing those things, or are we letting them be destroyed? Something to think about. Oh, welcome to things I worry about all the time. Now, worry, of course, is very closely akin to fear. And learning to manage fear, that's also a part of the theme of this Samhain and Halloween season. And, things like, watching the scary movies and the engaging in the custom of trick or treating, having the spooky decor, dressing up. All of these things are ways for us to explore fear in a controlled way, sometimes by taking on the mask of the monster or by having, an atmosphere within our homes or on our front porch that, is very friendly to the oogie boogies or things that, ooh, these are things are scary. Oh, look, I have these big spider webs. And sometimes they have real spiders in them because, and sometimes it is just the toy plastic spiders. It's things that are meant to, on an ordinary day, things we would feel ill at ease with. But for a certain period of time throughout the year, it is customary for us to explore, indulge, and there's a lot of different benefits to this. And I would like to bring this up to people because lately I've been watching a lot of, decorate with me for Halloween YouTube videos because, well, I love this season and sometimes it's fun to see the way people decorate. I've lost count of the number of women in particular who said, I don't really do scary Halloween. I do like cute and friendly and fun. And I thought, okay, I'm not saying that you can't do that, but it does sound like there's an attitude of some people, they just want to avoid anything that might possibly make them feel afraid or something that might reference something that they are genuinely afraid of. They don't want to learn to confront these things. And that's missing part of the point, not just of Samhain, but also of Halloween, because Halloween is the common cultural celebration. It's saying, oh, I don't want to deal with it, as if saying that I don't want to deal with something means that somehow you have been excused in life from dealing with that thing. I mean, if only it did work that way. But when we do take these things on, what it teaches us is how to function despite being ill at ease in some circumstances. It also takes some of the glamour out of the things that we're afraid of. Sometimes once we face something, it's not nearly as scary as what it was before we learned its limitations, before we learned what it's actually capable of, the limit of the damage it can actually do. And we need to do that. We need to be able to learn to make our fears smaller and more manageable. And there's a lot of things that might induce us to be afraid, very serious things going on in the world today. I have not been ignoring the news by any stretch of the imagination. We're not really talking about some of the awful things happening in this video because that's not the theme of this video. But, I'm aware, and I get afraid just like anybody else does. But we've got to be able to still function despite that fear, to be able to tell the fear that its sensation is not the most important thing. Because what needs to be done in our lives, whether it's on a daily basis or for bigger projects, those things continue to need to be done regardless of what our emotional state is, regardless of how fearful we might be. And if we learn that and accept it, that can really motivate us to create better coping skills, but also just to develop more of a robust backbone, become more brave. I hear a lot of people talk about the bravery deficit. Well, you become brave by learning to face your fears one by one. And you can start with the smaller ones at first. There's nothing wrong with that, but you continue building yourself up. You say, yes, I'm afraid, but my fear is not the most important thing. And it may seem like all of our fun, silly costumes and our decorations that they don't particularly play a role in that, but they certainly can. And I think they do on an unconscious level. And of course, if you choose to deal with this more consciously, you can really take all of the paraphernalia from the season, all of the things that are related to this idea of fear and monsters and, things that feel like they're beyond our control and sometimes are, but it can become a teaching tool for us, a source of meditation, a place to focus our energies of saying, well, I can certainly manage my responses a little bit better. It's a huge challenge, but I think it's one that we are equal to. Next, I brought us another tarot spread. I've been liking these tarot spreads I've been finding on Pinterest. And so I brought this one. This one is called Spooky Night, and it's this little cluster of things. And what it really made me think of is, you're walking up a hill, you get to the top of the hill, and then you fall down a hole, you get the bottom of the hole, and then you walk back up on the other side, and things come to a different fruition. So that's kind of the ebb and flow that I feel within this tarot spread. So let's see what cards I pulled, because I'm not going to bring you a tarot spread and then not, do a demonstration of how it's to be done. Because for one, it's interesting to see just how someone might go through the process of interpreting it. And if you hear some noise in the background, my apologies. The kitten found an open box and is having a wonderful time with it. But back to what we are doing. But I also always go through the cards just in case there's someone who's new to divination, just so they can see how it's done and maybe get a different impression of it than what they had going into it. So the first card in the spread is focused on the question of how can I safely travel down unknown paths? There's a lot of different unknown paths. We are living in a period of time where the future is extremely uncertain. The only thing that we do know is that things are not going to continue to go on as they have in the past. We are in a different chapter now, and that's just the way that it is. And appropriately enough, I pulled the Death card. Now, the booklet that goes along with this deck has to say that, all endings make way for new beginnings. This represents an abrupt, totally unexpected change. It's destruction followed by new growth, a release from old patterns, new ideas, and opportunities. So it is fear and excitement all rolled into one. And it's interesting that that it came up in the context about learning to safely travel down unknown paths. I think what death is representing in this context is that absolute, total, not going to fight reality acceptance that one thing has ended, another thing beckons, and it's going to it's going to require greater alertness, so that when the new ideas and new opportunities do come around, when you see there's an opportunity to let go of old patterns that may have become destructive or were always destructive. In order to do that, you're going to have to allow things to actually be different instead of longing for the past. Embracing that future and knowing consciously that it will be different and being okay with that. So that's what I'm seeing, that safety is tied to that acceptance of the need to build a new future. Now, the second placement in the cards asks the question, what truths are awaiting me in the darkness? And I pulled the Five of Ghosts, which represents disappointment, disillusionment, sorrow, a loss of friendship or love, evaluating what remains after loss, and vain regret. This is really coming across as, what represents a challenge, this going through this process of mourning, not really wanting to let go, even though, as we saw in the death, that letting go is essentially going to be the key to getting out of this old pattern and being able to move forward in a really constructive way. So that represents that challenge, and accepting that challenge is going to be necessary, because you can't just reconstruct what you feel like you lost. Sometimes things come to an end for a very good reason, and that has to be the way that it is. And that could be very difficult, particularly if you are in a deep state of mourning. And speaking of mourning, yesterday I came across this video of a psychologist. He came across randomly on my YouTube feed, but he did a whole video and he was talking about the differences between grief from acknowledged external sources that anyone would understand, loss of job, loss of a pet, loss of a loved one, things like that, things that anyone would understand does constitute a loss. And then he talked about ambiguous grief. And essentially, without going into all of his professional jargon, ambiguous grief is tied to the idea of the death of dreams. You may never have had something, but you had the dream of something, and now you are at a point where you are facing the reality that it will never happen for you, which is a terrible form of grief. And it's not a form of grief that people can often understand, even if you could articulate what it was that was bothering you. And that's really what this Five of Ghosts is representing to me, that the death of a dream has happened. And all efforts to try to resuscitate that dream won't just be in vain, but will actively prevent any ability to move forward. Now, the third card asks the question, how can I shed light on the mysteries before me? And I drew the 10 of Imps, which represents being overburdened, trying to take on too much, excess in all things, using power for selfish ends. I see this card as representing a roadblock. This is something that's going to get in the way of letting go of that which must be let go of. It's a getting in the way of accepting that death. And it also speaks to me of distractions, this idea of being overburdened, trying to do too much, excess, all of that stuff. Yeah, that does strike me as pursuing distractions in order to avoid feelings. Now, if I have any of my fellow INTJs out there, you know exactly what this is. We're very good at coming up with ways to not feel our feelings if we find them icky or we don't feel like dealing with them for whatever reason. And what this card is really representing to me is that coping skill, which is not a coping skill, it's an evasion skill, and we all know it, that isn't going to work. And because that's not going to work, and it's being made very plain in this reading, that allows for the opportunity to say, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to feel it. I'm going to have to go through it. I'm going to have to bring an end to the conscious mourning and be sincerely open myself up for new things to come. In order for something new to be created, I have to allow the death of that old and to stop fighting it, stop trying to recreate it in a different form, allow it to happen. And then the fourth card is asking, what is waiting? Oh, crumbs. There we go. What is waiting on the in the mist? And I pulled, let's see, it was the Two of Ghosts, and that represents new friendship or love, harmony, balance, reciprocity. So all in all, if the death is accepted, if you get past the challenge of the death of a dream, if you are able to get through the temptation of just being unduly distracted, if you just go through the natural organic process as it should happen, the result at the end of it is a more balanced and harmonious life. Relationships will be improved. The all-around state of one's own well-being is going to be improved. You're going to have a better outcome, but you're going to have to let the icky stuff be icky and just get through it. So, not the funnest of stuff, but on the other hand, this is what Samhain is also about. It's about getting through some of the icky stuff that we have difficulties accepting in life. Those themes of death and the very end of the harvest season, things coming to an end, the spiritual year coming to an end. These are all things that, we might resist letting go of when the time does come to let it go. And this whole reading just comes across as a little bit of a whack and saying, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to cope with the icky thing in a healthy way. Otherwise, you'll just get trapped in the same old patterns, and it repeats and repeats and repeats without end. And that's no good for anybody. So are you, we, are all of us going to make the spiritual new year actually new? And this is where this idea of patterns comes back in, because people in general are actually pretty good at noticing and identifying patterns. But when it comes to breaking them and allowing for new possibilities, that's when it gets very, very hard. Politics are a really good example at this tendency. Everyone hates the status quo, no matter what their political opinions of things as they are. Everybody loathes it, detests it, does not want it to go on. But when people take bold action to try to shake up the mix, do something different, especially if they're trying to bring things back into a state of where they're supposed to be, people just recoil. What a chaotic, horrible thing for them to have done. Oh no, the consequences, they did something different and now the pattern is broken. And people suddenly start saying things like, well, maybe it is better to have the devil you know rather than the devil you don't, and all of that nonsense. But the real problem is that they are afraid of the change. And right now they are more afraid of the change and possible consequences of the change than they are at the continued struggles of the status quo. And that's pretty revealing about people's attitudes, I have to say. However, renewal, which, we need in more ways than one in our society, and which, if we're being honest, probably a lot of us need in more than one ways in our soul, that renewal isn't going to happen if our behaviors and attitudes remain exactly the same. You do what you always did, you will get what you always got. And, if we go to that Albert Einstein quote, those who do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, that is the definition of insanity. And so that it is. And I don't think that we need to court any more insanity into our lives. I think the past few years have taken quite a toll on everyone's mental health. So uh, we're going to have to come to terms with the scariness of change and not knowing the outcome. And that's a weird, perverse thing about these horrible patterns and status quos that are detrimental to people. In a way, there's a twisted kind of comfort in knowing what the outcome will be. It's like women who date the wrong kind of man and they know eventually he's gonna, go off and leave. And they get involved with him anyway because, in a way, he's safe. He's a safe choice. You know what's going to happen from the start. You know how it's going to end. You know that, what the process of what it's going to be like after he does leave or after you dump him. You know what's going to happen, and there's something oddly comforting about knowing what is going to happen. And that's another reason why it's so difficult to break out of habits and of destructive patterns. So we're going to have to break out of that mindset. We're going to have to say, that twisted sense of comfort, probably not good for me. And because I know it's not good for me, I'm going to consciously fight that off when I feel myself sliding into that old pattern. And the other thing about patterns is because, of course, not all patterns we have are bad. I mean, just look at the pattern of the seasons, the pattern of our pagan holidays, all this and that. These aren't bad patterns. These are things that we actually can rely on in a healthy way. But we can't effectively carry on these traditions and allow these good patterns to have greater hold in our lives if we aren't going to adapt to the changing seasons of our own personal lives. We see a lot of people who cling to immaturity, who don't really want to become adults, who struggle with transitioning into more responsible positions in society, who struggle to become parents, who struggle even to get married because, that's too much of a commitment. It's scary. Grow up. And then you have people who struggle with letting go of the bloom of their youth. They struggle with transition into midlife. They struggle a lot with old age. They struggle with being in this phase of life that they're actually in, and they will fight off any lessons attempting to teach them so. They'll say, oh, well, growing old it just happens, but growing up is optional, as if remaining in a childlike state is somehow respectable or somehow of value. I mean, it isn't. It's fine to be a child when you are a child. And it's fine to experience that same childlike wonder when you discover something new. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are a grown up, there's a lot wrong with you not conducting yourself accordingly. And acknowledging that your job as an adult is very different than what your role was as a child or even as a teenager. And of course, once you get into your 40s and then beyond, you have a different role still. And you cannot live that full life. You cannot have this full human experience that you want and that you honestly need if you can't accept where you actually are in that flow of time. So if you find yourself transitioning from one chapter to the next, this might be something that would be helpful to meditate on so you can make that transition more gracefully and to make that transition without regret. And of course, moving on, it does require that we put down things that no longer serve us. That means sometimes we have to make a conscious decision to change the topic of conversation inside of our heads. I've noticed people who've gone through trauma or people who've had very intense experiences, they tend to constantly relive them. You'll often find they constantly retell the same stories. They constantly can't get over this particular emotional hurdle. They just can't move on because they've been existing in this horrible, hell loop. And they can't put it down. They can't change that subject in their minds. And then I'll notice this a lot in pagans who had a pretty intense experience with Christianity or, any other kind of previous religious or philosophical upbringing. They really were taught that, that the world was one way and their whole world view is built upon that. And so when they find themselves being shaken out of that, and they're saying, well, I don't think that actually was the sum total of all that is. I don't think what I was taught was correct. I don't think that this manner of spirituality or this philosophy is really for me. it's still that acknowledging that isn't quite the same thing as putting down what you were taught, or knowing, what you were taught that was actually still going to be useful to you. What principles actually do cross some lines and which don't. People struggle to let things go. They don't know how to be done with it. They don't know if it's okay to be done with it. They might feel like they're being a bad person if they let anything go, or that they're not sufficiently educating people if they let something go. And so I think the question that people would do well to consider is, what is it that you need to not have to think about these things, whether it's a prior religious experience, or it's a bad relationship, or if it's some other kind of life regret. Maybe you always wanted to pursue some kind of career, and for a variety of reasons, you ultimately did not do that. What is it going to take for you to set that down and say, what happened, happened? And it doesn't necessarily have to dominate my life today. It does not have to be the thing that defines my future. What is it that you need? And I can't tell you in this video what you personally need. That's something you'll have to meditate on yourself. But just ask, what is it you need? Why are you still stuck here? What is it that you're trying to learn? What do you need in order to let go and be finally released from this thing? Now, creating a next chapter in life, that is going to require cultivating a resolute spirit, not constantly looking backwards into the past, and to be proactively building what you actually want. Life isn't for sissies. This isn't a spectator sport. This isn't something that we can watch YouTube videos and watch what other people do, copy and paste in our own lives, and expect to get meaning and satisfaction. Finding out where we fit in that grand tapestry of life, and what our purpose is. And even as our purpose in life does change, because of course that changes as we change. It changes as we go through different phases of life. Doing all of that you can't just passively do it. You can't just follow someone else's instructions. You can't just do what everyone else does. I mean, you do that long enough, you're going to have yourself a very interesting midlife crisis. I don't recommend it, and you don't have to experience that. So, I suppose the main thing I would like to leave everyone with at the end of this live stream is that you do not have to create needless problems for yourself, and you can make use of this particular season to make that clean break, in order to say that what I have mourned enough. I am ready to go on. You can use this season the way it has always been intended to use, because it's not just the changing of the physical world. It isn't just, the thinning of the veil and various spirits roving about a lot more freely. It isn't just all of those things. This is also about putting to bed things about yourself whose time has passed, and doing it gracefully. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you, everyone who was here with me. Again, on these live streams, you don't have to be bashful. Don't worry about interrupting me as I'm rambling, or me losing my train of thought. It's important I can find my way back to it. And, I hope as time goes on, people do choose to be a bit more vocal, because I think that makes for a better experience. I think it makes me a little bit better in what I'm presenting, because I'm interacting with someone else's concerns, and they can bring things up that I didn't necessarily immediately think of, and that leads to a richer conversation. If people are new, don't be bashful about that either. No one's going to criticize you for not knowing things. As long as you're respectful when you ask questions, like we covered a couple live streams ago. And of course, if you are from another religion and this is all very new for you, I mean, don't be shy about just asking, you know, could you clarify that? I don't understand what this means. I'm not one of those people who wants people to just shut up and listen to me talk. If I have a very active brain, so I know what I think. I'm constantly thinking things. My brain is in constant discourse with itself. So I don't do this just to hear me talk. So again, in future occasions, make yourself known, make yourself heard, and I guess I will see you hopefully next week. There's been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes on my end, so I'm hoping to keep up with the new routine, but we shall see. Have to remain adaptable. In the meantime, continue to enjoy spooky season, and I will see you guys later. Bye.